What is the worst thing your so has done that you have forgiven? Forgot me in the hospital. I had told him to pick me up at 2 p.m. and he agreed. 2 p.m. comes and goes. 3 p.m. comes and goes. I have no money for a bus ticket because I had been too stressed to properly pack my bag. When I went to the hospital, I walked the 10 kilometers home where he was working and completely unaware of the time. I was reading The Bourne Identity. He had already finished it. We got in a fight and he told me how it ended. That was in 1985. I have technically forgiven him, but in my heart, not really. He opened the Amazon box with his Christmas present after we had just talked about how I hated him accidentally opening my mail, and specifically told him that his Christmas present would arrive and not to open it. That was our first fight, and he still doesn't understand why I feel so strongly about it. But he doesn't open my mail anymore. Edit. He hadn't lived with anyone in a long time and wasn't in the habit of reading labels. It wasn't malicious or naughty, just forgetful. Oh man. This year my brother mailed his birthday gift to me. It arrived early and came in an Amazon box with my name on it. I told my husband what it was and set it aside to wait for the day if my husband, love the guy, doesn't have the best memory. Few days go by. He spots the Amazon box and he wonders what arrived for us. All Amazon packages have my name on them. So this isn't normally a wife's name means no touchy scenario, and opened it. He then came up to me holding the contents and was like, "When did you order all this? NGL." I cried. Spoiler alert, happy ending. On our first date, hadn't met in person yet. He stood me up. I was extremely busy after we matched on Bumble, but he was so awesome from our chats, it's almost like he was a catfish that was designed specifically for me. That when he convinced me to meet him after work, even though I only had a 1-hour window free, we had already planned a date the following week, but he couldn't wait. I took it. It was late, and it was a dive bar. I sat alone getting hit on by a local drunk named Trevor while he ignored my texts. The last text I sent read, "What benefit is it to you to stand me up?" Then I went home. I was finishing up police getting ready to move a few days later and was still living in the house that I shared with my ex despite being broken up for several months at this point while he lived in a motorhome. So I had to walk of shame by my ex into my packed up empty house while I was already feeling low. The next morning I woke up to my phone blowing up. Apology text after apology text starting in the middle of the night with an extremely weak excuse about falling asleep on the couch. He also asked what he could do to make it up to me. I told him I wasn't interested anymore, but I would go on our original date later that week if he did two things. Took a photo of himself with that day's paper to prove he wasn't a catfish. And then on our actual date he had to take a picture in front of the restaurant proving he was there before I even left my house. I literally laid in my new room, had moved by this point, dressed to the nines waiting for proof, and then I got into my car and drove the 15 minutes to meet him. Ended up being the best date of my life and the love of my life. A few years later we now live together and are discussing getting engaged. We aren't perfect, but he's my best friend and kind and thoughtful. I also see how sleepy he is. I would never ever advise someone to give a man that doesn't value your time a second chance. But it blows my mind how close I was to not having him in my life. The extremely short story is he drove us to a movie theater. We got into an argument and then he left me there with no ride to get home. This was before Uber. I was in my early 20s and in love. I should have ended the relationship then, but I didn't. No surprise. He turned out to be emotionally manipulative. Edit. To clarify, we're no longer together. I had an ex do this to me too. We got into a fight pulling into the theater and he parked. Watched me get out of the car, thinking we were going ahead with the movie, and then he pulled away without me. It was so embarrassing. I had to call all my friends to see if they could give me a ride and most of them had already left for college. Ugh, I feel for you. To make my story worse, it was either my birthday or the day after my birthday, so he not only broke my trust in him, but also ruined that day too. I ended up calling my sister to come get me, even after he had turned around and tried to get me to get in his car and head take me home. I couldn't trust him to take me home after that. Lived with his ex for 6 months and got annoyed when I was continuously upset about it. Broke up with me 4 times. Ruined my 20th birthday by yelling at me for being sad my friends didn't show up. Yelled at me for crying when he made me cry. Yelled at me for hugging a guy I worked with in front of him. Yelled at me for being anxious/upset at his friend's 21st birthday after I had been in a car crash that day with my mom. No injuries, just shaken up. Yeah, I'm glad that's over. He watched Legend of Korra before we'd even finished the first season of The Last Airbender, although I literally begged him not to. I have forgiven him, but this will not be forgotten. OMG, when I was in college, my BF and I worked at a coffee shop the morning after we had gone to the midnight release of the last HP book, and he was sneaking chapters while I was working, even though we agreed to read the book together. I still haven't forgiven him for yelling out Dobby died while I was in the middle of a drink order. Stone cold betrayal. All bets were off when it came to Harry Potter. After midnight releases, I'd barrel to my mom's car with earplugs in and barricade myself from society until I finished the book. I just wouldn't have talked to you until you were finished. There would have been no way I could have waited to read it with someone. Come to think of it, what's joint reading even like? It seems like it would be insanity inducing. I was very dizzy and very tired for a couple weeks. He kept telling me I was fine and essentially saying I was being overdramatic about it. I went to the hospital, and as it turns out I was incredibly anemic and required 3 blood transfusions over a 2-day period. He felt very, very bad. Same. Exclamation mark. I had an ex do the exact same thing, and when I passed out in public, he was so irritated that I had to go on an ambulance ride and get 2 transfusions, and then wanted to leave hospital and go home, so I said yes, just go. He did. I had to call my ex-husband's mom to take me home at 2 AM. Needless to say, I broke that off after that. It was crappy. My exes did a long list of bad things that I forgave them, including repeated betrayals, multiple lies, psychological violence, insults, gaslighting. But my BF never did anything like that. If you're with her asshole, please just send them to the fantastic land of duck. You'll find someone better. Same thing here. Put up with a lot of bullpoop from previous partners that I will not list here. But the man I'm with now is the complete opposite, and I still pinch myself. We squabble occasionally and have our differences, but I never doubt for a second that I'm not foremost in his mind, and vice versa. He's honestly the most horizontal, thoughtful, conscientious and amazing individual I've ever come across. Even if we hadn't have got together, I still thought that of him, and everyone he knows agrees. Went to a party together. I drank too much. I passed out in bed. He took my finger and used it to log into my phone while I was asleep. Back when Apple had this iPhone security feature. He proceeded to look through my entire phone and text a guy all night while pretending to be me. He was convinced this guy and I had something going on, which was not true at the time. It was borderline hilarious to me, the idea that he was pretending to be me and conversing with another guy all night who I legit didn't even know. I asked him what they talked about, and he told me it was actually a nice conversation. I forgave him and continued to date him. Looking back, I cringed so hard. Edit, we are no longer dating. Cheated, got arrested, and drained our savings paying for an attorney. That's the very short version of it. I forgave but ended up leaving a few years later. Forgiveness was not worth it. Someone who is willing to put you through that pain once will never be the partner you need. And forget ever trusting them again. With my fiance, we've had our share of arguments and disagreements, but he has never betrayed my trust or crossed a boundary in a way that required forgiveness to move past. That's what a good partnership is. First baby. The baby was in the NICU due to complications, so I was alone in the room. My Phil comes from out of town and he doesn't drive, so my husband spent 4 days being his chauffeur and taking him shopping and out to eat while I'm in the hospital alone. Sick. I had developed a bad infection. Spending as much time as I can down in the NICU trying to nurse a baby covered in tubes and wires. Eating hospital food while my husband and Phil ate nice restaurant food. When did come he had his dad with him, and his dad didn't see any reason to come to the hospital since he couldn't see the baby. So the visits lasted a few minutes and then Phil wanted to go to a store or go back to the apartment to relax. Husband never came alone. After a few days of being alone I finally lost it on my husband. I was sobbing about how lonely I was and how much he had let me down and how he prioritized his dad over me and his son. He felt horrible and the behavior instantly stopped. He was by my side the rest of my stay, and the next time we had a baby he told his dad to stay in a hotel and get a cab to the hospital. I forgave this, but I've never forgotten it. I was in a different country with my family to return the day before my day, so I asked him to invite people over for that afternoon to have a little party. He said he had, and on the day he comes up to me and says I forgot to book off work, so I'm going to that. Your party starts in an hour and leaves for work. He didn't invite anyone, and I sat there alone for like 3 hours waiting on friends to show up. They all ended up telling me they hadn't been invited, or they couldn't make it, etc. I had a friend call me when she was done work asking if the party was still on, and I told her what happened, so we ended up drinking together, but that was a really hurtful blow to me. I forgave him until we broke up a month or two later. Looking back he was a poop BF and I'm so much happier we're not together now. Took advantage of my nursing salary for years. I made more money by far, and I thought that it was my responsibility to pay for more things. Years down the road, when I was still paying for all of our groceries, most of the utilities, and later on all of our utilities, all of our entertainment and vacations, it got frustrating. We tried to split things as close to 50/50 as we could, with me taking the heavier brunt, and he was responsible for his individual bills, phone, student loans, etc. Close bracket. Then he lost his job and I picked up all financial responsibilities because I figured that's just what you did in a committed relationship, right? I forgave it for a long time until I finally had enough after he got a new job. But I was still paying for everything and racking up credit card debt trying to support 2 grown adults in just one income. He got a job, but just never assumed any responsibility except for his student loans and cell phone. I was paying all rent, utilities, food, entertainment, trips, etc. And he just saved all of his money. Final straw came when I told him he was going to have to start helping me with the bills around the house again. I couldn't do it alone anymore, and I'd been doing it about 4 or 5 out of the 10 years we were together. Relationship ended soon after. I guess he didn't love me as much as he loved taking advantage of me and my income as a nurse. When I threatened to cut the purse strings, he decided to cut his losses. Lesson learned. I'm still paying off some of that debt. When live-in BF was too occupied getting to know a new female friend, texted each other right when they wake up, leaving for work, gets in the car and phone calls until he gets to work, during work, after work phone calls again until home, sits in the car for another 30 minutes talking after parking, comes inside the house and starts texting until dinner time, played game together /voice chat, stays on voice chat chatting for another 30 minutes and then sleep at 11 PM. That went on for a good 5 months and told me they are just friends. Forgot to mention, I said I'll forgive this time and the last, because I never said he can't have female friends or ending one. All I said was if he can't respect my time and doesn't think that his actions were twisted, then I'll be gone and will stay gone. He can have her instead. That woman should have used her brain too. She has a partner. Very disrespectful. For a long time, I thought he didn't come to see me in the hospital when my mom thought I was having a stroke. It was my first panic attack. Really bad. I found out later that my stepfather told him that he couldn't come. All of this was in an attempt to get me to break up with him. We have been married for almost 5 years now, and I love him more every day. He'll probably delete this because it's still the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But broke up with me while I was in the shower. We were having, like, not a fight, but a crisis. And I went to take a walk and clear my head and then got home and got in the shower, where I sat in the shower floor crying. Suddenly, the curtain opens and has looking down at me and saying we should break up. I scream, try to cover myself, and begged him to give me a towel. And I realize that Hez having a panic attack. I ask if he really means it, and he says he immediately wanted to take it back. So I say okay. I put on clothes and hold him as he quakes and cries. Head never cried in front of me before. I forgave him for it, but it's ruined how I see myself. He left me a few months later, just as abruptly and just as based on his own crisis of mental health. But as much as I know that, I can't ever shake the crystal clear image of what he must have seen, looking down at me, naked and vulnerable. And it makes me feel just as rejected and awful as I did in that split second even now. My ex once forgot to pick me up at the airport after we hadn't seen each other in 4 months. When I flew to another continent, only to visit him in his semester abroad, I wanted to just turn around. I've forgiven everything because I'm terrified of being alone with 4 relatively small kids. The worst though is I've forgiven his affair that he's been having for the past year. An affair that has broken my mental health and landed me in the hospital, but I still forgave him. He got way too drunk by sneaking drinks at an Airbnb from the person's massive liquor cabinet. He peed on me when I tried to carry him to the bathroom. Then after an ambulance ride to the hospital because he hit his head after falling down in the shower, I had to walk to the car which was miles away at 3 AM in an unknown city, in my pajamas with no money, and drive us all the way home. Carried him up the stairs and put him on the couch. He doesn't remember any of it. I forgave him. Twice actually, because he did it again about a year later on our first camping trip together. Pee and all. He dropped me off at the hospital in the middle of the night because he had to go home and sleep because of work in the morning, as though I wasn't scared/concerned about my work as well. I had to ask my parents to come get me. 40-minute drive at 2 AM. He also went as another woman's date to a wedding, despite me saying I felt uncomfortable with it. The woman was also someone he had dated in the past, but it didn't work out, so they remained friends. Thankfully we're no longer together. I had been having pain all day and finally broke down and wanted to go to the hospital. I asked him in tears to drive me there and he said, "Can we go after Breaking Bad?" I screamed in pain and we left immediately. In his defense, it was the series finale and we were 22. My husband forgot to buy a Christmas gift for me this past year. He went to Walmart maybe an hour before the store closed on the 24th, and I have some Tums and eyeglasses wipes in my stocking on Christmas morning. Not having anything under the tree on Christmas morning isn't a huge deal to me. It's more about the thought that goes into a gift for me, and this had very little thought behind it. We've moved past that, and he ended up getting me something that's super meaningful, and I really hope he remembers that thought counts more than anything. It would have never been an issue if he originally ordered what he ended up getting as a gift and just said it won't be here until January. Left me at the altar. Forgave him and still friends with him to this day. I don't know who is the idiot here. TBH. He had a friend that emailed him regularly. Most of her emails were her talking crap about me. She had only met me twice, so I couldn't figure out why she hated me so much. It pissed me off that he wouldn't shut her down whenever she said things about me that weren't true. He was afraid to say anything because he has hard time with confrontation and doesn't have a lot of friends. Eventually she stopped responding to his emails. After years of no contact she emails him out of the blue and again goes no contact. I had asked him before if anything had happened between them in the past. He always no. After this last email he tells me they were never involved. But after we had been together a year she tearfully confessed that she was in love with him. When she didn't get the response she wanted, that was when the crap talking started, and he just pretended she never said she was in love with him. I'm still friends with past lovers that my boyfriend knows about and has spent time socializing with. None of my exes or my friends have ever talked crap about him. If they did I would shut it down immediately. I'm still mad that he lied about her feelings for him for years. But now it makes sense why she hated me so much. I'm pretty sure her last email was just to check if we were still together. He slept with someone else before we were officially together. So while in theory he didn't cheat on me, We had been seeing each other for 3 months and he knew me well enough to know that would hurt me. Then he never told me, and I found out over a year later. He ran up $2K money on a credit card I didn't have the login info for, and I didn't know had a balance on it. I'm the financial person and schedule all the bill payments, and I've been trying very hard to manage our finances to get us out of credit card debt. I understand how and why. He is extremely depressed, and he was buying video games, which are pretty much the only thing that help him feel better for some amount of time. But I felt extremely betrayed. He thought I was mad about the money, which sure but wasn't the main issue. I felt like he lied to me, even if it was by omission. I was furious and heartbroken. We got a therapy session as soon as possible, and it took a while for me to forgive him, but we worked through it. It absolutely helped that he was extremely remorseful and was willing to do anything I asked him to do that would make me feel better. That's the worst and pretty much only thing has done, which is why I was willing to work through it. Had it been the worst of a string of things, I would have left and sought a divorce. A year before we actually got engaged, he hinted he was gearing up to propose, wanted to look at venues, price things out, etc. After about a month of this, he broke down and said he wasn't ready. I was devastated and so embarrassed, having to go back to vendors saying there was a change in plans. It nearly ended us. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.